Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today. We're excited to take you through some of the advanced threat hunting capabilities that you can do within Azure Sentinel. My name is Joe Burtnick. I'm the CTO of Cybersecurity here at Contact, and I'll be joined by Austin Durkin, our SOC lead, who will actually be doing some of our live demonstrations today. This is part of a series of webinars that we're doing currently around Azure Sentinel security monitoring and security threat response using Microsoft technologies. So please feel free to look at the other webinars in this series. We've got some great partner webinars that talk about integration with Azure Sentinel and, of course, our services around that. And this is an extension of over 15 years of services we've provided in network operations, cloud transformation, and, of course, cybersecurity. And we will be introducing next month a new product offering called Cyber Defense Center that's based around Azure Sentinel, and encourage you to keep out looking for the additional information we have around Cyber Defense Center. If security management and monitoring are used in Azure Sentinel is really key to your strategy, Cyber Defense Center will be our solution to help really deliver that as a fully managed service from Contact. Of course, this sits as a platform with all of the rest of our solutions, including managed threat response, vulnerability management, breach assessment, and other security services. But let me dive right into some of the key things with Azure Sentinel. I want to give you a bit of a background on this session, but really this is going to be a bit more in-depth and technical as we really dive into the solution and take a look at how you can do threat response, threat investigation, and most importantly, hunting threats across the Sentinel platform. But as a quick introduction, one of the key things that makes Azure Sentinel really compelling is that it is first and foremost a next generation bit of kit. It's got a lot of great capabilities to enable security researchers, threat hunters, and security SOC teams to really have the capabilities to see the whole environment and to do their job really well. But one of the things that makes Azure Sentinel so interesting is that it's based on the Azure cloud pricing model. And so it is a pay-as-you-go solution for enabling customers to have access to security monitoring in a way that they couldn't have before. So we're really excited to work with Azure Sentinel as really a core platform to collect, detect, investigate, and respond to security events across the whole estate. And because this is based inside of the Azure cloud, it natively consumes and uses some of the really phenomenal technology, such as Azure Analytics and Azure Log Services from all the other services sitting in Azure, such as Office 365 and others. And this really helps provide a central view of security across the entire estate. Additionally, because of the rich capabilities around logic apps and other extensions, Azure Sentinel not only becomes a core SIEM solution for analysis and log aggregation, but significantly enables your team, and of course our team here at Contact, to do automated security operations, and that really helps close the window of risk for many organizations. Azure Sentinel is a cloud-native SIEM, so it sits in the cloud. If you were to compare it to other solutions out there, such as Splunk or Logarithm, it'd be very much like their cloud solutions. And because it's in the cloud, it means that we're able to collect and aggregate information from all the cloud infrastructure, especially anything within Azure. But remember that while it's in the cloud, that doesn't mean that it doesn't support the whole of the estate, and it does have rich capability for monitoring your existing on-premise infrastructure and pulling all of that data together just as any other SIEM solution would. The benefit, of course, is it being in the Azure cloud and enabling that cloud scale for deployment and operations. But one of the things I'm most impressed with, having looked at this solution, and at Contact, we've been delivering security monitoring and SOC services for many years now across a number of different technologies. But one of the things that's really unique about Azure Sentinel is you can tell that from the ground up, they built it with the security operations staff, the threat researcher in mind. And so while it's a product that's only been on the market for about 18 months, they did a phenomenal job of putting all the tools necessary to really enable a SOC team well. And in the hands of experienced security analysts and threat hunters, it can be a powerful solution because it leverages all of the capabilities of log analytics and AI within the Azure cloud. And so we're able to mine for threat intelligence, across multiple estates, but we're also able to mine data within the environment in ways that you couldn't do with other solutions. So it's a really powerful set of technology that really is key to delivering instant capability to the defenders in the organization and scaling and supporting your organization as it grows, because it natively consumes and grows in line with exactly the data it's collecting and can support your organization's digital transformation journeys. The beauty of that cloud native SIEM is that not only are all of the log sources in the cloud, which can be extremely rich, staying in the cloud, if you will, but with Microsoft's pricing model, all those key log sources are free. So everything coming from Azure Cloud, as well as the first 500 meg of all of your on-premise server data from Windows systems, all come in free of charge to Azure Sentinel. Most importantly, it is a consume pay-as-you-go model. So it scales up naturally, not only from a technology perspective, but from a commercial perspective. And it's really been backed by a strong investment on Microsoft's part in security. Not only have they tooled up their teams with some really top-notch talent across their organization, they invest in a number of different security solutions, and the support that Azure Sentinel has seen across the community is profound. The number of new connectors, products supporting the technology, and it is driven very quick acceleration through the entire Forrester and Gartner Magic Quadrants, because its capabilities are very rich and it's being well supported by Microsoft and the broader community. But with that bit of background on Azure Sentinel, what we really want to drill into today is how Azure Sentinel can be a key component for supporting all of SOC operations. We'll start with some of the core elements around visibility and collection, but then we'll really dive into some demos about threat hunting and incident management and other analytics that we can do. But to give you a sense of the scale of Azure and Azure Sentinel, it automatically, again, collects data from any of the cloud infrastructure that sits within Microsoft's Azure environment. So that means that everything from Office 365, your infrastructure services, your VMs, as well as your security alerts, Azure Defender, Intune, as well as Azure AD, all natively come into Azure Sentinel. And what that really means for many customers is that you're looking at very quick deployment times for a solution. Instead of 6 to 8 months to really onboard your environment, on day one, all of your cloud data is coming into Azure Sentinel. And this can be, of course, fed by all of the additional data from other cloud services, as well as all of your on-premise environment. And so regardless of the complexity of your environment, the ability to pull this information together through custom connectors, through a native data collection, both Ceph and syslog, as well as WEF connectors for Windows environments, all means that this can be a central place for your entire environment and see the whole of your estate as it does security monitoring. And within Azure Sentinel, not only does it collect this data, but intuitively, it's going to present ways for us to visualize this information. And so within Azure Sentinel, these are called playbooks. You could also call them dashboards, if you will, but it enables us to see this information coming in. So it's no longer a process of having to mine obscure log information and just simply generate incidents from it. We have rich tools to explore information, visualize data, and identify when suspicious behavior might be a threat indicator that needs further exploration. And so what I'd love to do now is introduce Austin, our SOC lead here at Contact, to take us into Azure Sentinel. We're going to do a quick overview of the solution, kind of orient everyone, if you will, and then we'll come back, talk about some of the threat hunting capabilities, and then dive into a bit more of a detailed demonstration. So Austin?
Perfect, thanks for that, Joe. Let me just share my screen. Perfect, and we should be all good to go on the Azure Sentinel side. So like as Joe mentioned, we need information feeding into Azure Sentinel for us to start reading it. So what Microsoft have done out of the box is we've got a few data connectors, and like Joe mentioned, all of these kind of online Office 365 logs, your SharePoint logs, your Teams logs, your Azure Active Directory logs, these are all completely free to ingest, and we can have a look. There's out the box data connectors, so this will go and pull
Austin,
all your...
would you share your screen? it's still showing mine, mate.
Oh, apologies for that. Perfect. We all good to go now?
Yeah, all good. Thank you, sir.
Sorry about that. So yeah, so like Joe mentioned, so we've got our data connectors coming in. So these are out of the box data connectors for your kind of Microsoft services. So what this gives us is workbooks and queries, and we'll go on to these a little bit further details when we get onto the threat hunting. But these workbooks kind of give us some baseline rules of what Microsoft expect to see as kind of malicious activity. And then we also get some query rules, so we can make that information that we're getting fed in kind of readable. And like Joe said, we can then present that into graphs, or we can present that into the raw payloads for the analyst to have a further in-depth look into the kind of discovery. And we also have, for your on-premise devices, we can forward all of that up to the cloud, like Joe mentioned, via syslog. So your devices that are on-premise, typically these could be your kind of firewall devices, they could be your antivirus devices, they might even be your patch management devices if you're using third party. We can take all of them, we can forward them onto a syslog collector, and then that syslog collector pulls them all up to the cloud. So all of your on-premise devices will be covered likewise with all of your cloud. And for these syslog ones, there are no kind of pre-built workbooks and queries. So that's what we do here at Contact. So we have a look at what devices and what information you're feeding into Azure Sentinel, and then we build out them workbooks and queries and start correlating that data further into the environment. Otherwise, we'll have just syslog information coming in and nothing's readable, and there'll be no instance kind of generated off of the back of that. So if we just go into our logs, we can do a quick log search, for example. Let me just got one ready built down here. So for example, let's have a look at this SentinelOne. So we're having a look at all common security logs that are coming in, and then I'm just ordering it by time generated sending. And then I want to have a look in the raw payload where device vendor contains, say, SentinelOne, for example. Let me just pull that back for 7 days so we definitely get some information in here. And then this will then go ahead and search all the common security logs that will get fed in. So these are all of our syslogs that are getting passed on from the kind of internal syslog collector, and then we can have a look at all of the results generated from here. So now that this information is coming in and now that it's readable, we've got some searches. We would then need some incidents, and we'll go into that a little bit further into detail, but we can have a look into the further payload. Like Joe mentioned, it's very enriched with data. We can have a look at what tenant ID is coming from SentinelOne. We can have a look when it was received. We can also have a look at what product it's coming from and what version of Windows it's coming from as well. We then see why the payload was sent, so we can see that it was a new suspicious threat detected, and it also presents the laptop. So it's nice, easy information ready to search, and we can then pull out this information and do a further search in Azure to kind of correlate that information further. And we can have a look where the suspicious path was, so we can see it was on the device, and we can see the full kind of device path there. And as mentioned, it was a syslog coming in. So now that we have this information coming in, we can then kind of generate incidences. So any of these rules we can then build out, and then we can create new rule alerts based off of that. So if I wanted an alert every time a SentinelOne syslog came in, we can then create the new Azure Sentinel alert that way. But we've got some pre-built out the box ones. So if we have a look at our incidences, so these incidences will be ones both pulled in from our kind of pre-configured workbooks from our data connectors, like mentioned, and they can also be built out from our from our custom-built syslog forwarders. So this one here, we can see it's an SentinelOne one that's identified there. We can then start looking at the SOC team, and we can assign it to one of the SOC team at the back end, and we can also change the status and likewise with the severity. So based off of the rule engine, we can have the rules. So when we see a certain threat, it auto generates the severity. So when we kind of code these in, a kill performed successfully is something that a SOC analyst I would like to know about, because we're going to have a rule generated for a new suspicious threat. So both of these are marked as high. And then we'll do a bit of further threat hunting later on, but we can then see what events correlate into this and what alerts generated from it. And then we can then have a look at the entities that were linked in it. So for example, we can see the hash of the malicious payload here. And we can see what incident workbook triggered it off as well. So we go and have a look at the incident overview. This should give us all the information from this overview, from this alert. And then let's go into the analytic rule. Here we can see how this analytic rule was set, and as well as what MITRE tactics were used. So for this one was executions. As we knew, there was a payload that was trying to be detonated that was successfully blocked. So this will flag up with our MITRE attack framework, which I'll show you a bit later on. And then we can see our rule query here. So we're looking at all common security logs. So we're having a look at all of our sys logs, and we're generating the time to send in. We're looking for all SentinelOne, and then we're also looking further into the payload. So the activity is kill performed successfully. So any syslog that is coming in with kill performed successfully, we want an incident that is created, and then we want to do some further extraction from that payload. So when the payload comes in, we need to pass that payload. So for here, we're going to tell the file hash custom entity to match up with a file hash. Likewise, with the IP custom entity, we want to pull out the source IP from the SentinelOne raw payload itself. And we can go into the instance settings here. So there's a lot of kind of group alerting that we can do in. So if we only want one alert for, say, if we see the process being run 10 times in the organization, do we want 10 single alerts for all of the machines? Or do we want 10 individual alerts for all of the machines? So here's where we can do the group alerting, and we can also automate the response as well. So if it's, say, a malicious IP address, we might want to do some further threat intelligence on that IP address, maybe virus total, so we can get all of them alerts back. And we also want to generate it into our ticketing system. So as part of the CDC offering, like Joe mentioned, it is fully managed by us here at Contact. So we will have a kind of separate managed ticketing system that you guys can have a look in and see what important offences have been raised themselves.
And those analytic rules become really interesting because what they enable us to do from a threat hunting perspective is when we're out there looking for suspicious behavior, we'll be actively mining within the environment. But once an incident is identified, an analytic rule is triggered, we then can execute additional data enrichment, such as querying the EDR or AV solution, in this case SentinelOne, for additional data, maybe pivoting on that user account to look at other access into Office 365, potentially looking against that user account to see if there's been, dark web data breaches, or if there's other suspicious behavior associated with it. So those automation rules really enable us to do additional data enrichment and to really bring all the information to the forefront for the SOC analyst to be able to make a proper judgment, be able to respond effectively, and close the security gap.
Exactly that. Thank you for that, Joe. So now we have all of the information that is feeding into Sentinel, and we've also got a few of our kind of custom built incidences that have been created. As we've used our data connectors, there's going to be some pre-defined incidences. For example, we can see here there is a high number of Azure Active Directory sign-in over a large number of geolocations. So as mentioned before, we can see all of the events that make up this incident, and likewise the alert that this incident was created from, and then we can see all of the entities here as well. So if we go in ahead and investigate this will then give us a kind of full kill chain of all of the alerts that were linked into this incident itself. So we can see here all of the description. We can see the MITRE tactic was initial access here. And we can also see the description of why the events triggered itself here. We can also have a look at all of the different entities, so we can see all of the different users that were trying to sign in into their Azure AD. And as it's all fully integrated, we can see what kind of domain they're on, what groups they're on, what their email address is, what their phone numbers are, all of that good stuff. And we can have a look at insights as well. So if we have all of our Azure Active Directory information feeding in, we not only see what instances they have raised on this occasion, we can also see historical information. So if there was a large amount of actions on the account, so for example, there might have been a few privileges escalations before this happened. So if a user was kind of a low-level user and they've been escalated to a kind of full-fledged admin, is that usual behavior? And then we can have a look at all the actions that related to this. So they might have been promoted themselves to a full admin and then signed in from Brazil, China, and then Mongolia, for example, and that's not usual behavior from this. So we'll get a different alert generated from this. So we can have a look from this user. Have we got any other related alerts from this user? So then we can start correlating it. So this is all time-based as well. So we can have a look that this user did perform a few different tasks that were related to incidences here. So for example, we can see the SharePoint incident here, and we can go and search for that entity. So when we go and do this log search here, it should display all of the raw payloads for these for the events that kind of raise into the incidents. And like mentioned before, it's got all of the information ready to go for an analyst to kind of use that information further to kind of maybe do some automated responses off the back end of that. But yeah, that's the that is the kind of entity.
Well, apologies to everyone. It looks like Microsoft Teams canceled us halfway through our session as we were about to swap over. So we're going to pick up the event live now. Austin's going to give us a quick run through of some of the visualizations and playbooks that are available within Azure Sentinel, and then we'll dive a little bit more into threat hunting and how we can pivot from different solutions. So Austin, show us a little bit of the playbooks, please.
Of course, right. So if we just jump into a playbook, I've just launched this Azure Active Directory audit log playbook. So this is one of the data connector playbooks. So all of our Azure Active Directory information that's feeding in is obviously now produced as a graph. This is all completely customizable. So we can choose if we want it the last 90 days, the last 4 hours, if we want to pivot on a particular user or a particular device, and likewise for the categories. Do we want application management, user management, group management? All of that can be pivoted down on. And if we have a look, we can have a look at the categories volume. So we've got 385 coming in, and we can see the breakdown of them categories. And if we scroll down, we can actually see the breakdown of these users as well. If we can have a look there. So then we can have a look at all of the user activities and the operation count against that. And we can also have a look at the trend. So if there's normally devices that aren't updated often, and there's a huge spike in kind of the device updates. Why is that? We want to know what's happening, what user are performing them, and what's actually happening. Likewise with the update application, this could have been quite an interesting one. What we was doing here with the kind of FireEye and SolarWinds is them SolarWinds applications that obviously had the malicious hashes in, was an application update. So what we was doing, we was correlating, kind of having a look at all of the updates, application updates, and then we was kind of passing that information to have a look at for the particular SolarWinds version to see if any of the versions that we were running were affected, and likewise with our customers.
And this is a great example of how it's with the Azure Sentinel solution, there is some rich capabilities to visualize information, because it's one thing to be able to mine through the logs. But when you're looking at your estate, trying to identify behavior that's good, that's bad, and manage events, being able to explore the data through a dashboard that comes, either built in with a connector, if you have a third-party product that's plugged in, or one you can customize and build yourself, all becomes a very, very powerful set of tools.
Exactly like that. And all of these dashboards as well, they can all be shared. So if you want to only share them with your kind of C-level executives and you don't want them to have a look at all the information themselves, these can all be exported and shared via your kind of Microsoft accounts, the usual ways. And there's a few other interesting ones, like adding a group as well. So we can see what users were adding what members into what different groups. And likewise, if there was a spike in group memberships, and then we want to do some further analysis of that to see what groups were kind of being escalated to. Were they high admin accounts, or were they a load of admins kind of getting their privileges getting their privileges rechecked so they don't have such strong admin privileges? If we just scroll down here, we can also have a look at the results data. So if there was any kind of unsuccessful updated applications, and likewise for any of the other ones, we can pivot down into these and we can see the results here. So if there was any kind of update failures, if there was any patches that kind of weren't getting installed successfully, we could see the kind of failed patches here, and then we can drill down into them further to see what machines them patches haven't been kind of installed on. And
great stuff, Austin. Let me just take us back to some of the overview pieces of Azure Sentinel, and then we'll dive into the second level of the demonstration. We'll really discuss how we can pivot around information and do threat hunting.
Thank you.
So as Austin just did a bit of demonstration. First and foremost, with any sort of security monitoring solution, it really comes to the richness that you can create incidents and then manage that. With Azure Sentinel, there's a great deal of capability to create incidents, rules, and analytics from any threat query. So it's very easy to transition from a threat hunting mindset to a detection and defense mindset, as well as the ability to act on all of these using playbooks and analytical rules. And one of the other beautiful things about the data analytics inside of Azure Sentinel is that it's able to capture logs from a large number of entities and have that feed into the threat intelligence that's experienced across the environment, but then as well the ability to create more detailed rule sets so that you can narrow down all of the data that's coming in to identify those needles in a haystack, so to speak, that are really key for detecting anomalies and suspicious behavior within your organization. And of course, from there, the ability to, once an incident's defined, very rich capabilities to take that to resolution. Now, that may be everything from data enrichment, it may be to patching, it may be to immediate action, maybe by closing ports or isolating systems. All of that can be automated through the rule set and the playbooks that sit behind Azure Sentinel. So with that being said, let me now kind of turn it over to Austin. Let's dive into Azure Sentinel. We'll take a look at some of how we do threat hunting within Sentinel as the forest, if you will, to see the broad level of the estate. And then we'll also pivot off and say, okay, once we've identified something in Azure Sentinel, then how do we dive into the supporting products? Because Azure Sentinel is a single pane of glass for security, but sometimes we want to drill in even further and pivot from Sentinel to another product. In this case, we'll be talking about SentinelOne. Similar product names, they both use the term Sentinel. Azure Sentinel is, of course, our cloud-delivered SIEM solution and threat hunting platform. SentinelOne is an endpoint detection and response capability that we've partnered up with Azure Sentinel for its rich ability to do threat hunting. So with that bit of an intro, let me turn it back over to Austin, and then we'll come back and close off with this opportunity to potentially do some Q&A offline or some other information about Contact.
That's perfect. Cheers for that, Joe. And like Joe mentioned, we're going to be having a look at the analytics around here, as well as some of the hunting queries that we can perform, and then having a look at the incidents, how we can add tags to them, and then looking into an incident itself, kind of pivoting over to SentinelOne, having a look what happened on the endpoint, and having a look how we can automate that or how we can respond to that. So if we have a look at through our analytic rules here, we can see there's many pre-defined rules from Microsoft, and likewise these all tie in with them data connectors from their Microsoft data sources that are coming in. So we can have a look at some of them. We can have a look at these ones, create instance based off all alerts generated in Azure Security Center. So this is one for Microsoft ATP. So if they see a malicious malware alert, they want to notify you. This is one of the rules that you can enable in it. And you can also do some kind of custom search rules. So like we said, SentinelOne doesn't have a data connector. We're getting all our information from SentinelOne via syslog, via that data collector. So we can have a look at the rule itself. It's for a kill performed successfully. So this is going to be a process that was marked as malicious that has been killed. We want to see that to make sure that that endpoint is clean, that SentinelOne did do its job properly. So we can have a look at the description. This is for a kill that has been performed successfully. But then we can also have a look at the rule query itself. So this is all written in Microsoft KQL, and we can have a look. I'll just run you through the kind of rule query again. We're having a look at syslog. I want it by time to send in. We're again pivoting on SentinelOne in that payload for the device vendor, and then where activity contains kill performed successfully, that's the incident, that's the events that I want to alert for this kill performed successfully kind of analytic rule, which will then later get created into an instant rule. I then want to pull out the hash, so the hash is all marked nicely, likewise with the source IP address, so I know what hash is affected and what source IP address it's coming from. So if we go ahead and edit this, it will show you the information that we just went through there, and the rule logic is just a rule that we created here. And then we can go on to our automated responses here as well. So these automated responses are when incidences have been hit and generated and we can see them instances, what do we want Azure Sentinel to run off and do? So one of the ones that we do is forward it to Halo. So the Halo is our ticketing system. So every single incident that comes in, like previously mentioned, they all get fired across the Halo. So all the information is easily viewable in Halo, and it's just that nice ticketing system for you to have a look into all of your kind of alerts. And we can also do some quite cool things around getting IP reputation. So if there's a large amount of kind of SSH connections to maybe one of your Azure machines, we can see all of that information because we get pumping all the Azure information into Sentinel. We might want to have a look what that IP address is. We might want to go and do some more further threat intelligence around that IP address, maybe see where it's registered to, what it's registered as, and maybe have a look at some historical data. Has it kind of been known as a command and control center server? Maybe it's been kind of hosting malicious payloads on there, malicious zip files, or maybe it's a genuine IP that's just been taken over. We want that further threat intel so we can have it run off and do that further threat intel based off of what rules are coming in. And we can isolate machines. So in SentinelOne, we do it on a SentinelOne level, but we can isolate machines when we see malicious files. If they're not getting kind of blocked from the source and we want to do some further analysis, we can have it so the machine isolates so it can't talk to any other machine on the network, but we can still get onto that machine to kind of do our analysis work. And then after that, we can then create this rule, and this will then get generated into an incident as well. So let me just pivot back into Sentinel. So there is many different rules that you can create, and many out-the-box rules. Likewise with the Office policy tampering, this is one of the kind of out-the-box rules that Microsoft gives you when you pump in your data with them data connectors themselves. And then let's just pivot over to our hunting. So these are our hunting queries. Likewise, we can create these themselves, and they also come with the data connectors kind of pre-built. And what these are kind of hunting queries that can run in your environment, kind of set what times you want, every 24 hours, every 12 hours, every 6 hours.
And just to interject here real quickly, Austin, so these queries that we're running really are the precursors of how we do threat hunting. So each of these queries is an exploration out in the environment to see if there are any suspicious behavior. If once we know we've identified suspicious behavior, we want to be alerted on it, we'll then create incident alerts from these threat hunting queries. But from a defensive perspective, I always love the idea of these being tripwires that we're sending out across the estate, that we can easily add more to them and run them live within the environment. We can run them on a periodic basis, like every 24 hours on a schedule, if you will. These map very closely to the MITRE attack framework, so we know that we're exploring all the different avenues of threat vectors into our estate. And then when we're actually doing live analysis, let's say we're on the hunt for a threat that's happening real time in the environment, there's also really great capabilities there. So these queries, think of them as, again, tripwires that tell us something's happening and allow us to go even further to identify where that is suspicious.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Joe. Yeah, like Joe said, that's the perfect way of explaining it, tripwires, and we can go and run them tripwires at any times. So let's just go and run this tripwire, the DNS lookup for commonly abused TLD. So let me go ahead and review the result. So we can have a look at the query that it's generated for us. So we're having a look at any kind of domains that end in the .click, .club, .download, .xxx or .xyz, and we can have a look at all of the connections outbound here. So we can have a look at the kind of IP address of the client where it's coming from, because it's passed like that, and likewise with what DNS server they've tried to connect out themselves to, or maybe it's just a website that they've visited. So ads.playground.xyz, as it falls into the x.xyz, it obviously flags it up here, and we can then obviously go ahead and create any of these into incidences like Joe mentioned. But if you want to see if this kind of information is even floating around your environment, we would then kind of set up them tripwires. Likewise for the latest IOCs, like mentioned, the kind of, if we go back to WannaCry, there was a lot of kind of destination IP addresses, kind of destination ports that we were looking for. We can implement all of them tripwires into our environment and then create instances off the back of that. But we might just want the initial search just to see if them destination IPs have ever been seen on our environment before. And that's where the tripwires obviously come into place. And then we can create the instances off the back of that, like I'll show you in a minute.
And one of the nice things from a vendor's perspective, from a managed service provider's perspective, is as we're going through and doing this threat hunting and research, as we create these tripwires for one customer, we can automatically look for similar behavior within other organizations. And so it makes it very easy for us to be able to aggregate threat intelligence, look for suspicious behavior across the estate, and be able to explore things even more.
Exactly.
Now, as I mentioned, one of the cool things within the threat hunting tool set within Azure Sentinel is also the ability to look at threat data live. And one of those capabilities is live stream. So this gives us an ability, if we think we have an attack underway, we have a live incursion in our estate, we've identified certain queries that we want to run, we can actually track these in real time, a whole set of these queries, and view that data, looking for anomalies. And so not only does this give us the ability to go back and look at historical information as logs are being, generated and mining those, we can actually use this as a live war room threat hunting console to identify when any of these tripwires are being hit. This is all part of that detection phase. How do we identify if something's happening? And then from here, we can either use the MITRE ATT&CK framework or other solutions to pivot down to do even more investigation.
Exactly that. So likewise, like Joe mentioned, with these live streams, here's one that we set up for multiple password resets by users. So we can have a look per user. The threshold is 5 password resets, and then we want to know. And then we can have a look in. We're looking into the payloads for these specific event IDs. And as it's all Microsoft information that's being pumped up to us, we're looking for these particular Microsoft event IDs because we're obviously getting all the event IDs information from Microsoft. And then we can go ahead and open this live play stream and play it. So we could play it now, gather our information over the next 12 hours, see if there was any malicious accounts that were kind of escalating their privileges, resetting multiple users' passwords, that sort of stuff. Like Joe said, it's about building out them queries and using it as a war room to kind of see what's going on in your environment and really having a look at what incidences and what rules you can create off of the back of that.
And Austin's team, as we get information on different attacks, so, when we get threat intelligence, we learn from the overall threat intelligence community that, maybe a certain type of attack is going after healthcare or financial services customers. Within that information is usually things such as it's accessing these ports, it's using these IP addresses, it's escalating credentials in a particular way. All of that information from that threat intelligence can then be built very quickly into a set of queries, and we can actually look at this information live. And so, having these kind of tools back when we had issues with Citrix servers being compromised because of a vulnerability that was being discovered, as those vulnerabilities are discovered, we're able to then double click into our customers and be able to identify these kind of behaviors and see if there's any suspicious activity based on, what is the current threat of the day, if you will.
Exactly. And like Joe mentioned earlier, this is really built from the ground up. So with all these queries, we can obviously run them to see what results come back, but it's all about correlating that information. So what we can do is create bookmarks. So if there's particular events that we want to bookmark, we can go into that query itself and we can have a look at all the results. So let me view all the results here. And there might just be 2 events that I want to tag. So there might just be this Skype one. I don't care about any of the Microsoft Office ones. We can then
take the intelligence from one portion of your security.
And then when we go back into our bookmarks here, this will then be created as a bookmark. So this is an easy way for analysts to kind of create the full picture and really show the true events that they need. There's a lot of noise sometimes with products kind of pumping out a lot of events. So this is taking the only important events and kind of building up that investigation on our side with the contact side to build out kind of what's been going on in your environment, what's been seen, when has it been seen, has it been seen on any other endpoints, and using them bookmarks to have a look into the events that we're obviously getting fed in.
Which is much more intuitive. In the past, what we've typically done is kept notebooks, right? So we would cut and paste all this information into a notebook. By creating bookmarks, it makes it much easier for us to then go refer back to it, and then not only refer back to it, but then pivot on that data without having to enter script data and other elements. So Austin, take us through a bit of how you pivot from Azure Sentinel to another solution. I know in this case, we'll be talking about SentinelOne from EDR. So walk us through some of those pieces and how you can use these products in tandem.
Yeah, of course. So where I normally start off with, so we can obviously start it from a hunt, but normally we see an instance coming in because this is already fully tuned and fully set up, ready to go. So if we go into our incidents and we're going to pivot into a different product here, so we can see this is a kill performed successfully from SentinelOne. We can have a look into the events that have obviously generated this this alert. Let's go ahead and run this now. So we can see it's been these 4 payloads that were kind of generated this event. So
To these other solutions,
kill performed successfully on this particular endpoint. So what I will do is pivot over to SentinelOne. Let me just open up the console now, and let me go back to the threats. Here's this one here. So I would then match up the threats, so we can have a look. It's this same cache service here. We can match them all up. To double check, there's the cache service. Have a look, cache service.setup.exe. So let's go into that. So we can then have a look into the events within SentinelOne itself. So obviously SentinelOne is our full EDR product. So kind of any hash that gets run through the endpoint, any network connection, any DNS modification, it all gets run through SentinelOne. So we can have a look here. So straight away, I can see this offense has been killed and it has been quarantined, which confirms what I've seen in the Sentinel, Microsoft Azure Sentinel dashboard. This has been killed successfully. So I go back into SentinelOne and confirm that. But if this wasn't kind of successfully killed, we can then go ahead and have a look at the timeline of what happened. So if we go back, we can have a look that it was the threat confidence. So it was a cloud that was
operations and cloud transfer
suspicious. So what I'll do is I'll go through the threat indicators to see why SentinelOne and their threat intelligence thinks this is obviously a malicious file. So we can see that it's a highly encrypted and compressed file, which normally isn't too great. There are obviously a lot of legitimate business cases for that, but this on top of